Some men fight for their country. Some fight for the memory of it. Warsaw, the 1st of September, 1939. 4:15 in the morning. You are 24 years old, and you have been a pilot for 3 years, and you are already at the airfield when the first German aircraft crossed the border. The intelligence came in last night and nobody slept. The sky to the west is still dark. The ground crews are moving in the half-light. Someone hands you a cup of something that was once coffee, and you drink it without tasting it, and you climb into your aircraft and wait. You have trained for this. You know what to do. What you are not prepared for, what no amount of training prepares you for, is the scale of it. When the Germans come, they do not come in ones and twos. They come in formation so large they darken the sky, wave after wave of bombers with fighter escorts above them. And the Polish Air Force rises to meet them with everything it has, which is not enough, which was never going to be enough. But you go up anyway. What else do you do? You fight for 18 days. 18 days of scrambles and losses and airfields abandoned ahead of the advancing army, relocating overnight to fields further east, further south, the ground war collapsing faster than anyone predicted. By the time it is clear that Poland cannot hold, you have been in combat more times than you can count, and you have watched men you trained with simply not come back, and the country you were defending is being divided between Germany and the Soviet Union, like something on a table being split between two men who have already agreed the terms. The order comes to fly south, Romania, then Hungary, then, by whatever route presents itself, by whatever conveyance is available, by foot when nothing else is, France. You do not think of it as fleeing, you think of it as continuing. The war is not over simply because Poland has fallen. The war is not over simply because everything you knew is gone. You carry 3 things out of Poland: your logbook, a photograph of your mother taken in Krakow the summer before the war, in a square that may or may not still exist, and a particular quality of anger, not hot, not the kind that makes you reckless, but cold and clear and permanent, the kind that does not go away, the kind you learn to keep in a specific place inside yourself and draw on carefully, like a reserve of fuel you cannot afford to waste. It takes you 8 months to reach England, Romania first, where the government is technically neutral and technically interns Polish military personnel, and where the border guards can be persuaded to look the other way if the conversation is conducted correctly. Then across the Balkans by train, by truck, by a boat across the Mediterranean. A crossing the weather made treacherous that should not have succeeded, and very nearly did not. France, where the Armée de l'Air takes you in and gives you an aircraft, and sends you up against the Luftwaffe again. And where you watch, with a horrible sense of recognition, the same pattern repeating itself. The Germans advancing faster than the maps can keep up with, the defensive lines holding and then not holding, the airfields abandoned in the night. France falls in June 1940. You have now watched 2 countries fall to the same enemy in less than a year. You know precisely what it looks like. You know the specific quality of the silence that follows. You fly your aircraft to England rather than surrender it. You land at an airfield in the south of England on a clear June morning, and a ground crewman who cannot have been more than 17 years old looks up at the markings on your aircraft and then at you and says, in the particular tone of English understatement that you will spend the next several months learning to interpret. Bit of a journey, was it? You tell him it was a bit of a journey, yes. They do not let you fly immediately. This is almost unbearable. There are assessments. There are forms. There is a language test, which you pass adequately, and a flying assessment, which you pass easily. And then, there is a period of what the R.A.F. calls familiarization with British procedures and aircraft, which means, in practice, that a 22-year-old British flight instructor, with perhaps 200 hours of flying time, explains the basics of air combat to a man who has been flying combat missions since before Britain was even at war. You sit in the briefing room, you nod as they speak, and you say nothing of what you are thinking. You are a guest in this country. The British are helping you. The cold, clear anger has a specific place inside you, and this is not where it belongs. The other Polish pilots feel the same. There are hundreds of you now, men who flew from Poland, from France, who made their way here by routes that would seem improbable if you had not lived them. You gather in the evenings in the mess, and you speak Polish, which is a relief that is difficult to explain to someone who has not spent weeks surrounded by a language not their own. You drink whatever is available. You listen to the BBC and hear the news from the continent, and you feel the particular frustration of a man watching a fire spread while someone is still explaining to him how the hose works. In July, the Germans begin their assault on the R.A.F. The Battle of Britain has started, and the R.A.F. is losing pilots faster than it can replace them. Meanwhile, the paperwork continues. You watch British pilots being scrambled from the airfield, and you watch some of them not coming back. Then you sit on the grass beside your aircraft and wait. In August, they let you fly. You are in the dispersal hut when the telephone rings. The sound of it goes through the room like electricity. Every man in the hut is on his feet before the orderly has finished picking up the receiver, moving toward the door, toward the aircraft, before the word even comes. Scramble. You run. Across the grass, which is wet with the morning, the ground crew already pulling the chocks, the engine already turning over, because they started it the moment the telephone rang, and they have done this enough times to know that every second matters. You get into the cockpit the way you have got into 1,000 cockpits, the specific sequence of movements, so practiced they require no thought. Harness, helmet, oxygen, and then the throttle forward, and the tail comes up, and the grass is rushing past, and then it is not grass, it is air, and you are climbing. The Spitfire is a remarkable machine. You have flown Polish aircraft, French aircraft, and now this. The Spitfire is something different, something that responds to you the way a good horse responds, as though it is reading your intentions slightly ahead of your hands. You have perhaps 4 hours in type before this morning. It does not matter. You understand each other. The controller's voice comes through the radio giving vectors, bearing, altitude, the size of the incoming formation. You climb through broken cloud into sunlight that is almost offensively beautiful for what is about to happen. And then, you see them. 100 aircraft, perhaps more. The bombers in their formations below, the fighters above and to the sides, the whole thing moving with a terrible, slow deliberateness, as though it has all the time in the world. You have seen this before. Over Warsaw, over the airfields of southern Poland, over France, you know exactly what those aircraft are flying toward, and you know exactly what they will do when they get there. The cold, clear anger finds its place. You go in. People who have not done it imagine that air combat must be terrifying in the moment. It is not. There is no time for terror in the moment. Terror is what happens before and after. The waiting in the dispersal hut, the lying awake at 2 in the morning, the walk back from your aircraft after a sortie when your hands finally have permission to shake. In the combat itself, there is only the immediate. The aircraft in your gun sight, the aircraft on your tail, the altitude, the fuel, the ammunition, the next 3 seconds. You are good at this. You have always been good at this, and the months of combat have made you better. You know things that take other pilots months to learn. How to use the sun, how to judge the angle of deflection, when to brake and when to press. You are also flying with a ferocity that your British squadron mates notice and do not entirely understand. They are fighting to defend their country, You are fighting for something that cannot be defended anymore. Only avenged, only answered, and that is a different quality of motivation entirely. Below you, England is a patchwork of greens and browns in the September haze. The Thames, a silver thread pointing toward London, and in the far distance, the coastline. Beyond that you see the Channel, then France, which is no longer France in any sense that matters. You are at 22,000 feet, and the air at this altitude is so cold that the canopy fogs at the edges and your oxygen mask has been on for 40 minutes, and you have learned not to think about the cold, the same way you have learned not to think about a great many things. The anti-aircraft batteries open up before you see the formation. You know them first as black flowers blooming in the air ahead and below. The AA guns firing from the fields and rooftops of Kent, throwing shells into the sky in clusters, each burst opening like something ugly and deliberate at the altitude where the bombers are crossing. The gunners below cannot always tell friend from enemy at this height, and the bursts are as close to you as to them, and you have learned to fly through the flak the way you have learned everything else in this war, by doing it and surviving it, and filing the knowledge away in the part of yourself that does not panic. Then you see the formation, and the scale of it drives everything else briefly from your mind. 150 aircraft, perhaps more, moving with that terrible, slow deliberateness that you first saw over Warsaw, and that still, even now, produces a cold, settling feeling in your chest that is not quite fear and not quite awe, but something that sits between them. The bombers are in tight formation, Heinkels and Dorniers, their shadows moving across the fields of England below, like the shadows of something vast and indifferent. And above and around them, the Messerschmitt escorts weave their covering patterns, and the whole apparatus is moving toward London with the certainty of something that has done this before, and expects to do it again. Your squadron goes in from above and to the side, which is the correct angle, diving through the escort fighters before they can react, into the bomber formation itself, breaking it apart if you can, forcing the bombers to scatter, disrupting the tight groupings that make them lethal. The radio fills with voices, English and Polish mixed, call signs and warnings, and the clipped shorthand of men who have no time for complete sentences. And then you are in it. And there is no more radio, no more formation, no more anything, except the aircraft filling your windscreen, your hands already moving, and the sound of your own guns firing, a sound you feel in your shoulders and your jaw as much as you hear it with your eardrums, and the smell of cordite that gets into the cockpit even at this altitude, and that you will carry in your clothes for the rest of the day. A Heinkel fills your gun sight. The broad twin-engine silhouette, the glass nose, the gunner in the dorsal turret already swinging toward you, and you give it a 2-second burst and pull away hard in a tight climbing turn. And that is when the radio shouts a single word in English that you understood before you understood almost anything else in this language. Brake. You brake. Hard left, stick pulled back into your stomach, the Spitfire wrenching itself around in a turn so tight that the gray closes in from the edges of your vision, and the blood drains from your head. And for a moment, there is nothing but gray, and the sound of the engine screaming, and the feeling of your own weight multiplied by 4 pressing you down into the seat. The tracer that was meant for you passes through the space where you were a half second ago, close enough that you see it rather than imagining it. Bright lines stitched across the sky, unhurried looking, like something almost beautiful, as though it has all the time in the world. It does not. And that is the only reason you are still alive. A Messerschmitt 109 flashes past above you, the pilot pulling up hard after the missed shot, and you hold the turn, bleeding speed, watching him, because the pilot who breaks off too early is the pilot who gets shot in the back, and you have survived this long by not breaking off too early. He climbs, turns, comes back around, and now you are turning toward each other, which is the oldest and most honest form of this argument. Two aircraft closing head-on, each pilot deciding in the same instant how long to hold the line before breaking away, a decision measured in fractions of a second that contain, in compressed form, everything that separates the pilots who are still alive from the ones who are not. You hold it longer than is comfortable. You have always done it. He brakes first, pulls away to the right, exposing his underside for just a moment. And you are already rolling to follow, already firing. And the burst catches his wing root, and he is trailing smoke and descending. Now he is no longer your problem. You are climbing back toward the bomber formation with your heart hitting the inside of your chest, and your hands, as always in the cockpit, perfectly steady. The engagement lasts 11 minutes. Afterward, descending back toward the airfield, your mind is very quiet in the way it always is after combat. That particular emptiness that is not peace, but is the closest thing to it that this life currently offers. Below you, the Thames glitters in the afternoon light, and London is still there, still standing, still sending up its own thin thread of smoke from the fires the night raids have left behind. And the bombers are turning back toward France, scattered and reduced, and the AA batteries below have gone quiet, and the sky over England is, for this moment, yours. In September, a Messerschmitt goes down over Kent. The pilot bails out and lands in a field and is apprehended by a farmer with a pitchfork and two members of the Home Guard, which is not the dignified capture he had presumably imagined. He is brought to the airfield, and you see him in the officer's mess. Young, fair-haired, his Luftwaffe uniform still immaculate despite the field, and the pitchfork and the indignity of the morning. He has the bearing of a man who is inconvenienced rather than defeated. He accepts a cigarette from a British officer, with the manner of someone who expects to be thanking his hosts for their hospitality before long, and wants to establish the right tone early. Someone translates. He is, it emerges, quite confident about how this ends. The R.A.F. is finished, he says, or nearly. A few more weeks. The invasion will come and then it will be over, and he will be released, and he bears no ill will. He says this pleasantly, as a statement of fact, the way you might tell someone their roof needs attention. He has the absolute certainty of a man who has watched this happen twice already, and sees no reason why it should not happen a third time. You watch him from across the room. You think about Warsaw. You think about the airfield in southern Poland where you last saw two of your closest friends who did not make it to Romania. You think about France, the second time you watched this happen, the second time the maps became useless overnight. You think you have been wrong before. You were wrong about Poland. You were wrong about France. You are sitting in a room in a country you flew to because it was the last one standing, and you are telling its defenders it is nearly finished. You do not say any of this. You finish your tea. You put your cup down. You walk back out to the dispersal hut because the telephone could ring at any moment, and when it does, you intend to be ready. Let him be confident. Confidence has a way of being answered. September. The tempo does not slow. You are scrambled 3 times on some days, 4 on others. You land, you refuel, you rearm, you drink whatever is put in front of you, and then the telephone rings again, and you run. The body adapts to this in ways you did not expect, not by becoming less afraid, but by becoming more efficient about it. The fear is still there. It simply learns to wait in a smaller space. What you did not expect, and what nobody warned you about, is the exhaustion. Not the physical exhaustion, though that is real enough. The kind that sits in your bones at the end of the day like weight. The kind that sleep does not entirely remove. It is the other kind. The exhaustion of sustained vigilance, of being at the highest pitch of alertness for hours at a time, day after day, with no end visible. Your hands are steady in the cockpit. They are less steady at the breakfast table. The chairs begin to empty. Not all at once. It is never all at once. It is one chair, and then a week later another, and then two in the same day, which is a different quality of loss entirely. You learn the grammar of it quickly, the way the squadron learns together without discussing it, the name that stops being spoken, the bed that is made and not slept in, the jacket still hanging on its hook because no one has yet decided what to do with it. There is a man named Kowalski who always ate his breakfast standing up, some private habit from before the war, and one morning he is not there, and his chair sits pushed neatly under the table. It is the neatness of it that is unbearable, the sense that someone has already tidied away the evidence that he existed. You do not talk about it. None of you talk about it. This is not coldness. It is the opposite of coldness. It is the only way to keep going. In October, the character of the fighting changes. The Germans shift their tactics. Fewer bomber formations, more fighter sweeps at high altitude, harder to intercept, harder to read. The invasion that was coming in September does not come. The weather closes in over the channel. The barges that were massed in the French and Belgian ports begin quietly to disperse. Nobody announces this. Nobody says the invasion is not coming. But you can feel it in the intelligence briefings, in the quality of the silence when certain topics are not raised, in the way the senior officers carry themselves differently in the corridors. Britain has not fallen. This is not nothing. This is, in fact, everything. The one thing that had to happen, the thing that was not guaranteed. That was not even probable when you landed on that airfield in June with your French aircraft, your logbook, and your photograph, and your cold, clear anger. Britain has not fallen, and therefore the war continues, and therefore Poland is not the last word. You do not celebrate. There is nothing to celebrate yet, but something shifts, very slightly, in the place where you keep the anger. It is still there. It will be there for a long time, but it has been answered, at least in part, and that is not nothing either. It is early morning and the grass on the airfield is white with frost, and your breath shows in the air as you walk to the dispersal hut. The sky is clear and cold and very blue, the kind of blue that is beautiful in a way you have learned to distrust, because it means visibility, and visibility means they can see you as clearly as you can see them. You have a cup of tea, real tea, not the thing that passes for coffee, which you have never understood and have stopped pretending to like. One of the ground crew, a young woman, one of the WAFs who have been arriving at the airfields in increasing numbers to take over the groundwork, has left a plate of biscuits on the table, which is the kind of small human gesture that you have come to understand is a specifically British form of comfort, the offering of something ordinary in the face of something that is not. You take a biscuit, you sit down, you look at the telephone. The men around you are doing the same things they always do. Someone is reading, someone is writing a letter. The cards are out in the corner. The jacket is still on its hook, Kowalski's jacket. Nobody has moved it. It has become a fixed point in the room, something that is there and not there at the same time. Outside, the Spitfires sit on the frost-white grass. Yours is the third from the left. You know every mark on it, every sound it makes, the specific way it pulls very slightly to the right above 20,000 feet, which is a thing you have never reported because you have learned to compensate for it, and in a strange way, it has become yours. This particular pull, this particular machine that has kept you alive through more sorties than you have counted. The telephone does not ring. You finish your tea, you eat the biscuit, you read the newspaper without taking it in. You look at the sky, which is still blue and clear and cold, and you think about Krakow. 14 months since you last saw it. It may not look the same as it did. You will see it again. This is not a hope. It is a decision. A thing you have decided in the way you decide things now. Quietly and without drama. The way the cold, clear anger has always worked. The telephone rings. You are on your feet before the sound has finished. Across the room, out the door, across the frost-white grass. The ground crew are moving. The engine is turning over. The sequence of movements, so practiced they require no thought. You climb into the cockpit. You are still here. This is the thing, above everything, the statistic that matters. You are still here. Kowalski is not here. Others are not here. The chairs are empty, and the names have stopped being spoken. The war is not over, and Poland is still occupied, and there is still a very long way to go. But you are still here, and the engine is still turning, and the sky is still very blue. The throttle goes forward. You were there. The Battle of Britain officially ends on the 31st of October 1940. The R.A.F. has lost 1,142 aircrew killed or missing. The Luftwaffe has lost more than 2,500. The invasion of Britain is quietly abandoned. Hitler turns east toward the Soviet Union, and the war enters a new phase. Number 303 Polish Squadron finishes the battle as the highest-scoring unit in fighter command, despite having entered the fighting later than most British squadrons. The Polish pilots, men who had already fought over Poland and France before arriving in Britain, brought a quality of experience and motivation that the statistics reflect but do not fully explain. Churchill said of the R.A.F. pilots during this period, "Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few." He was speaking of all of them. But among the few were men who had already lost everything once and come back anyway. Men who were not defending their country because their country was gone. Men who were fighting for the memory of it, and for the possibility that memory might one day become something more. Poland was liberated from German occupation in 1945. It then passed under Soviet control and remained there for over 40 years. Many of the Polish pilots who fought in the Battle of Britain were unable to return home safely. Some were refused entry. Some returned and faced persecution. Some never went back at all and built their lives in Britain, in Canada, in whatever country would have them. They had fought for the memory of a country. What they got back was not quite the country they remembered, but they had fought, and that was not nothing. And the sky over Britain in the autumn of 1940 was theirs as much as anyone's, more than most perhaps because of what it had cost them to reach it. History is full of moments like this. If this one moved you, subscribe, so you don't miss the next one. A thumbs up helps more than you might think. And leave a comment. Tell us which moment in history you'd like to step into next, or simply that you were here. Every voice matters. This is You Are There. We'll see you in history.